Hello, and welcome to the Power Within podcast. I'm your host, Laurie. Today, I am so thrilled to share this episode with Ryan Woodruff with you guys. Ryan is a Marine veteran, and he is the CEO of Clear Paths for Vets. He's doing incredible things, and Ryan has been through a lot on his own journey, and he's using his story to share to make people aware of the work that he's doing and the work that's being done at Clear Path for Vets. And I was so honored to get the opportunity to have a conversation with him, for him to share his story and to share about the work that he is doing. I think that he is incredibly inspiring, and I think that he is just a remarkable human being. And I'm so thrilled for you guys all to hear his podcast and to share his story. I hope you guys enjoy this episode, and I hope that you can learn something from Ryan. He has quite a bit to share with the world, and I think that there's a lot that can be learned from him and also from all the work that he is doing. And be sure to check out Clear Path for Vets. They're doing some incredible work for veterans and integrating them, helping veterans, work with service animals and be more involved in their communities. It's really, really, really great what they're doing, and I think it's so important, and there needs to be more stuff like that for people that are coming out that have protected and served our country. Thank you guys all for listening so much. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So I wanted to ask you, I know that when you were younger, you bounced around a lot, you moved around, you didn't really have a lot of friend groups and everything. And you said that your interest in the military came from watching that Full Metal Jacket movie. And I wanted to ask you, what about that movie inspired you to want to be in the military?
Yeah, if I'm being honest, it terrified me the first time I saw it, and I had to reflect and ask myself, is this really what I want to experience? But, for my childhood and growing up, I really lacked confidence, and the military, and specifically the Marine Corps, Full Metal Jacket, was like, well, if I can get through that can certainly be something that I can bank and help boost my confidence, my physical strength, mental strength. That's debatable, but it was just the tight-knit group, the fraternity, the military culture. I've always had an affinity for it, but the movie was definitely, as a kid, as young as I was when I watched it, and I probably shouldn't have been watching it at the age that I first saw it, it just spoke to me in the right ways.
Now, do you feel like having served in the military that what you see on film, does it romanticize it at all, or do you think that there's a lot of differences that people don't see?
These days, I would say film is getting more accurate in the reality of experiencing combat, war, military culture. I think that the film industry has come a long way. Historically, I would say, you think about like Rambo movies, of course, that's not 100% accurate, and it romanticizes a lot of the different elements of it. Just gravitates towards what people want to see and the thrill seeking and all that. But newer films, like some of the Clint Eastwood films that have come out, American Sniper, they really capture like the weight of combat, war, coming home. And I think they did a good job with that. And sometimes, my wife gets mad at me when I watch these movies because sometimes it puts me in a little bit of a dark space. But it's true. They've come a long way, and they're capturing it much better than they have had in the past.
Now, what was different for you, kind of like that expectation versus reality of what you thought the military would be like versus what it was like? Was there a shock for you there?
So, yeah, for sure. I mean, I expected it to be hard, for sure, physically, and it was. The mental stress is something that I don't think that I really prepared myself with. Basically, for my 4 years that I served, looking back, I felt like I was kind of stuck in a pit of dismay or depression for that entire time. The brotherhood was there. Like, the people that I served with, we've gone through some of the hardest things that you can imagine, and that really does form like these unbreakable bonds, something I wouldn't trade anything in the world for. But it's nobody can really describe like the sleepless nights of, being out in a theater of combat, haven't showered in 60 days, and standing like on post or doing these patrols in 120-degree heat. It's not nobody. The movies don't represent really well like what the physical weight of that all is like, and literally and figuratively. It's daunting. I mean, it breaks you very quickly. And when your body breaks, your mind is weakened, and you really have to have the resilience to push through that kind of stuff. Also, like losing friends. That's something that took me a long time to really understand the weight of. I would say I'm still navigating that these days. And when you're actually serving and doing your job, the military does a great job at hardwiring your brain differently, conditioning you in such a way that you're going to reflexively respond to different situations because of all the training that you've done. And it really puts some guardrails on how you view some of the horrific things that you experience until you actually leave the military. And then all of that stuff kind of comes flooding back in because you just have more time and space to really rest in those experiences.
Now, you joined the military right out of high school. You went there. So I always, it's interesting, in the U.S. you can join the military right out of high school, but you can't buy alcohol. You can't, do all those things until you're older. Was it when you actually got out of boot camp, and I'm sure there was people from different ages, but when you got out of boot camp and when you got into, because you went right into, it was out like a wartime at that point, what was the differences between like guys that you had met who had been in that for a while versus the younger guys coming in like you?
Well, we used to say, we still do. I mean, the Marine Corps, it's an interesting subculture once you get into your unit, and they're all different. Serving as an infantry Marine, like those that had gone to combat before I did, we used to call them salty, or they called themselves salty. It's just a figure of speech to talk about how they have salt. They've been through hard times, and that can be an actual literal term. I remember sweating so profusely in Iraq that your camouflage uniform is just like starched. But that was the term, right? And these guys were, like 19 to 22 years old, and they just were of a different class. When you come into the military as a new guy, it's made known pretty quickly that you're the new kid on the block. And you have to go through certain rites of passage to earn the right to be, enter into that brotherhood. And it's a long, enduring thing to experience. And I would say that was definitely one of the challenges early on too. It's not like you get out of boot camp and you claim the title of Marine that you have climbed your mountains. There's so many more to climb after you get out of boot camp that it's kind of a misconception. It's not. You earned the title, you did the 3 months in boot camp, and you're a full-fledged Marine. In infantry units and a lot of other units, there's a lot more that you have to navigate through before you can be included within that tribe.
Now, you had said when you were in, you made like that brotherhood and you met all these people. How hard was that for you, though? Because I know that you've mentioned that a lot of the guys, especially your first time that you went into war, that a lot of those guys didn't make it home. How do you process that when you're in that situation and continue to do your job knowing that like your brothers and stuff aren't going to be making it home?
It's for everybody, it's different. And for me personally, I didn't process it. I just worked through it. It was another wall to kick down and keep doing the job. To be honest with you, it was not something that I had the time to really distract myself with. The weight of it was hard. I mean, in the real-time experience of actually being in the presence of a friend that's breathing their last breath, there's no words to describe that. But then you go back to your observation post or place of duty, and you're out on a patrol within a couple hours navigating your job. there's really no time for you to sit down and wrestle with that stuff. And the sheer exhaustion that people experience when they're in a combat zone doing the jobs that we were doing, you're so exhausted that like any chance you get to sleep, whether it's 45 minutes or a half hour or maybe a couple hours, you take every chance you can get, no matter where you are, right? I remember raiding homes for our job, right? Searching for known insurgents, and we were on like rotational duty where we're like sleeping in these homes on the floor with our full gear on, just because of, you got to get it when you can. It's a continuous thing. You got to rest when you can. You got to eat when you can. So you're really in survival mode the whole time. And when your brain is wired to be in fight or flight, survival mode, and experience the full weight of combat, grieving comes really last on the list.
So in between your two tours, when you had come back from your first one and you had already experienced all of that, is there a grieving process there, or were you, because you knew that at some point you were going to have to go back, that you were just like, okay, I'm going to compartmentalize that for later and then I'll deal with it after the next tour is done?
So I think the compartmentalization came really easy for a lot of us. And when we come back home, we're right back in the thick of training and working up for our next deployment, especially because of the time that I served. There was really not a whole lot of downtime. I did go home and get to experience, some time with my family, and I coped with alcohol. Like that was the only way for me to experience any kind of numbing of the pain, or any kind of, I hate to say it, but any type of good feelings only came through drinking at all. It's the only way for me to experience pleasure after I got back from Iraq. And even before then too, it's kind of embedded within the military culture, but it's compounded by some of those traumatic experiences for sure. And it just became a way of life for me.
Now, when you go into the military, you have that 3 months where you're in boot camp and training and preparing. And when you come out, I actually, when I was listening to you talk about how when you got out of the military and you were getting kind of transition, it was like 3 days. So I want to ask about this because I know that a lot of people in the military, and I know that other people outside of the military also have this, that military members are not taken care of once they get out of the military. And a lot of them do face drugs, alcohol, homelessness, all those other things. What do you think that the government could do better instead of just giving 3 days? Because they give months to train to go in and then just kind of throw everyone back out, and there's not support for these people.
So I think the federal government does what they can in a very formulaic way. They're looking at, treating the symptoms but not root causes. So helping people navigate like a very procedural way of going from the military to civilian culture. Here's how to write a resume. Here's the type of jobs you may be, you might be qualified for based on your military occupational specialty. Here's how to navigate disability and compensation. And all those things are like necessary, how to navigate your benefits and all of that, but they're not really discussing some of the more difficult parts of that transition. Most of us that served and went right out of high school never really experienced true adulthood outside of the military. So the first, within that developmental period, the only real world experience you have is that of what you did in the military. And again, back to like compounding the weight of that, going through multiple tours to Iraq or anywhere for that matter, and then trying to process all that in a very short period of time doesn't do any service member any justice when they're trying to figure out how do I just become another kid on the block? Like it's hard to explain, but traditional warrior culture, thousands of years of history explain how these warriors would return home, and there were certain rituals and things that they were doing before they were embedded back into their community. And it wasn't about vocational training and benefits. It was more about like cleansing the soul, and the community really gathered around these warriors to help bring them back into their communities. But there was a bridge of time before they could do that. And I think that's what's been lost over time, is that, you know, we've gone from a society that really looked at the weight of war and all of that is something that requires almost like a ritualized process to go through in order to be back into your community. And that requires a lot of faith. It requires a whole lot of, just the belief system that I have to go through this in order to really heal from some of the things that I did or experienced. And these days, we just don't get that. And there's not a community that's enduring for the test of time to really help these service members integrate back into their communities. It's not something that happens in 3 days or 3 months. Candidly, it's taken me almost a decade to really fully integrate back into my community. And it took not just myself and my family, it took the whole village to really get me to where I'm going. So I'm fortunate and I'm blessed to have experienced that, but it's certainly not the rule. It's an exception. I think every community really needs to embrace the fact that when their service members are returning home, this is something that they need to take seriously. They served, they did their time, and we need to be with them for however long it takes to bring them successfully back into the society that they're going to live in.
Now, do you think that there could be something better done, though? Because I know you mentioned like that was kind of like culture, like everyone drinks. And I shared with you beforehand, like my dad was in the Marines and alcohol was something that he struggled with and still does. And, when I ask him about it, he'd be like, well, me and my buddies, that's what we did. We drank and we did this. Do you think that there's something that they could better do to kind of alleviate that? Or is it just a culture?
It is culture, but that would be like a philosophical problem to solve within the system. It has to happen during active duty, not post-service, right? Because it's so ingrained within military culture that you're really trying to... I mean, the Marine Corps was founded in a bar, so like no surprise, that's just has carried on with the test of time for over 250 years. So like, how do you undo that? I think it requires some strong coaching and mentorship while active service members are actually doing their jobs. And for them to really truly understand the weight of this and the why. I was talking to somebody yesterday about neural pathways and how they're formed. And when you get embedded within a culture like this and you find that there's a pleasurable response or a dopamine reaction to drinking, and you do it as consistently as we do, that's a hard thing to, regrade or get unwound into a different type of behavior. Someone like myself who learned a lot of human behavior through dog training, I can understand it from that perspective. There's inputs, there's outputs, there's associative learning. But really it takes the leaders within the military, and I mean like not just the battalion commanders and the generals and the officers, I mean team leaders, platoon sergeants, squad leaders, to really be to be like a good coach for the younger generation coming through, like to help them avoid those pitfalls and to be themselves an example of really what the characterization of what we're trying to represent should be. And, I think there's a lot of stories that can be told. Other veterans that have gone through this and gotten out of the military, like myself and others, just to say, like, get out of this now. Like, I'm telling you, it's best if you start to change your ways now, turn away from this as quickly as possible and start filling those gaps with something different. Because if you take away the coping mechanism and don't fill it with something, there's going to be something else that comes along, and that's a dangerous place to be.
Now, I know you said that you struggled with alcohol when you got out of the military, and I want to ask about this because there's a will to want to change something, and then there's someone trying to tell you. And if it doesn't come from within and you wanting to actively make that change versus changing for somebody else or because someone else wants you to, it's not going to be successful. So for you, can you share a little bit about your journey with that?
Yeah, so I'm fortunate in that I found something where something found me within my life that I felt really I needed to protect. And the threat of losing that for me was overpowering my desire to drink alcohol. And, I got married in 2014. I had kids in 2017. And my behaviors, and there's no excuse for it. There really isn't. It was just nonsense. I really endured through that for a long period of time, and so did my wife and my kids for their first year of life. And I just one day came home and said, what am I doing? Like, where am I going? And if I continue down this road, how am I going to end up? And I have deeply embedded alcoholism within my family for generations, and I realized at that point, like, I need to break this cycle, or else I'm just going to pass it down to my kids. And I don't want to look in the mirror one day and look at my son or my daughter and say, like, well, this is a trait that I passed on to them. And I didn't want to lose them either. I was literally drinking myself to death, blacking out every night, never remembering anything from the day prior, all the while functioning within my job and everything. But that's just because it was built into me through my experience in the military.
Now, I know you just said that like drinking was part of your family for generations and different things. Was it something that you started partaking in before the military as well, or no?
Yes, 100%. I mean, going back to 14 years old is when I was first introduced to alcohol. I would say I didn't really have a full-fledged problem with alcohol until after I had gotten into the military, but it's something that I had experienced far earlier, and I would say that's true of many people. They experience these things at a young age, and it's unfair almost, right? Because the way it makes you feel for a kid that's fearful, lacking confidence, and doesn't believe in himself, to experience like alcohol for the first time and all of those things go away, being like a superpower, you fall into this trap really quickly, and it's easy to stick it out and just keep doing that because of the way it makes you feel. And so for sure, I had that issue before I went in, and it was just compounded by my experience.
Now, did you ever notice, like when you were younger, I know for myself, I could notice in my family members who drank it were alcoholics, the dysfunction of it. And I remember seeing that as a young kid. And I know you said you wanted to break that so that your kids didn't grow up that way. Did you ever kind of see that and understand that when you were younger, or no?
I couldn't process it. It was a norm. To me, it just was normalized, right? Like, I couldn't really, my immature brain didn't understand that anything was incorrect about this way of life. It was by extension my family, and then my social networks, everybody was kind of doing the same thing. So no, my brain was not mature enough to process this as being something wrong. It took several years for me to really reflect back on that. And again, back to like the power of your story, I think it's important for everybody to really to write their story out, to look into their life experiences, how they were shaped into who they are today, so that they can identify some of those milestones along the path that really embedded within their character, and ask themselves, like, how do I change this? And, what would I say to that kid back then in order to help shape their future?
Okay, you just touched on something else that I wanted to ask you about later. Writing, and you were talking about writing out your story. And I'm huge into journaling. I think that this is such an important thing to do, just to make discoveries about yourself, but also to see your, the things that you need to work on. But a lot of men can see this as like especially like the generational, like masculine men who are like, I'm not going to talk about my feelings or different things. Was that hard for you to start like writing and getting into that mindset of like self-care versus external approval?
Yeah, I would say don't go at it alone. There's there's a lot to be said about being embedded within a community that will support you through that process. That was certainly my case. And the biggest thing about writing your story is I found that I was almost lying to myself on multiple occasions and avoiding certain things that had happened within my story that I just didn't even want to acknowledge to be true. And so, that's something to really put a lens on and pay attention to. If you're starting to feel some feelings come up about something that you're writing down, go ahead and put the pen down and just wrestle with that for a little while. It's good to have a community of those around you that really want to help you through this process. There's so much contemporary information on this, and there's ways to navigate this process. And I was lucky to have a group of people walk me through it, and I've actually been experienced other people telling their stories, seeing the vulnerability, the tears, the emotions. Because yes, Marine Corps infantry guy, strong, firm believer in like fitness and health and all of these things, to go through my story and then share it publicly with a group of people that I've known for a while. I mean, it broke me down right to tears. Like within seconds, it was just very difficult for me. But the healing that I experienced and the restoration after doing that has been greater than anything else that I have ever experienced, and really helped me like just open up that box that I had just kept away for so long.
So when you were saying that when you got to those parts where you didn't want to be truthful with yourself, was that was it hard for you to write because you hadn't accepted that part of yourself, or because you were working through those still? And how was that, like, how did you know that feeling that you didn't want to write it out and let it be true?
Well, the brain is interesting, and I think it has its way of closing certain doors on things and making you think they actually didn't happen. Yet it somehow comes to the surface time and time again, and the reality is it did happen, and it's important to name that. For me personally, like, there's guilt, there's shame, there's, pain involved with a lot of parts of my story that I just wasn't prepared to deal with. Lived a whole life of avoidance, compartmentalization, and my way of dealing with things was to walk in the opposite direction. Again, back to like growing up, moving around all over the place, never being rooted in one place at any one given time. That helped me understand some things about my personality, and like, it was so easy for me to pick up and move away from a relationship or an event or a circumstance or whatever it is that was providing me with some level of discomfort within my life. I would move away from discomfort instead of moving towards it, where that paradigm has completely shifted since going through this process.
And how do you now, because obviously if you don't deal with something, it's going to continue to come up, and it might continue to come up in different ways or different situations or different relationships. When you kind of see something that comes up for you and you haven't maybe identified it, how do you work through that to be like, okay, wait, this is because of this?
So for the longest time, I wouldn't deal with those things, and I would go into a dark place for a prolonged period of time. And I'm not going to lie, those times still happen, but they're much shorter than they used to be. Now I have different coping mechanisms that I've developed over time: prayer, meditation, solitude. I have a community that I can go talk to now. I have people that I can confide in. And stonewalling is one of the worst things you can do in any relationship. And people know me well enough by now to where they're willing to reach out and ask me questions if they see that I'm acting a certain way. And because of my experiences throughout these different processes, I'm so much more willing to say, you know what, yeah, like, I'm not great, and this is what's going on. I've lost sleep over the past 3 nights, and I keep having certain dreams, and I don't really quite understand it. And having a support system that you can go to and talk about those things is critically important. And I don't want it to sound like clinical health is important. And for me and many others, like, that's the first step. That was the first step for me, like, to start working with a licensed clinical social worker for several months before I could dip into a community. And it was like an incremental progression for me to get to this space where I had these different tools, and I was equipped with a lot of different skills and things that I could defer back to. It's building a reflexive response, right? Like my reflexive response used to be avoid, move away, suppress with alcohol, and it has changed to like when the storm comes, I actually walk towards it now, because the fastest way through that storm is walking a straight line into it and getting through the other side. And I can weather it far better than I could in the past by trying to move away from it.
I love that, the accountability piece and going through, because a lot of people sometimes with adversity, they don't want to face that. But I know for myself in different aspects of my life, the toughest challenges that I've been through have also been the things that have given me the greatest blessings later on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I want to, go ahead.
Nope, that just agreeing with you.
I was going to ask you, because you did mention faith, and finding that, and that helped immensely in there. Do you think that having faith, however you look at that, religion, universe, however that is, do you think that for you makes things easier, especially when you're going through challenges?
For me, it's a keystone variable for all healing, 100%. And that book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, really speaks volumes to that. These people that were experiencing concentration camps in World War II that were exposed to the most horrific things imaginable. Like reading that book as many times as I had, and really truly understanding like the people that made it through that had a value structure to hold in high regard, right? Like they had something beyond themselves that kept them going, and the others that did not just couldn't. There's a lot of different reasons why people didn't make it through those experiences, but those that endured had a meaning that went far beyond their own circumstances. It was their faith. It was whatever their belief system was to keep them going. There's just some things that in my life that I can't explain or bring meaning to, and my faith ties that all together for sure.
Now, do you feel like things would have been different for you had you had faith to begin with before you went into the military? Do you think that could be a key for people?
It might. So 100, yes. I think earlier the better. As I'm raising my kids, this is something that we've built within our family structure, and it's very open, honest. It's not legalistic. It's not forced. It's just a conversation, really. And I watch as my kids grow and make these decisions on their own, and to move into faith more instead of it being like hey, we have to do all of these things by this process. And I think that's like a very dangerous place to be when it comes to these topics, and it could steer people away from it. I had a very surface level faith before I entered into the military, labeled as a Christian, non-denominational. And there were certain things that I was starting to become interested in, especially after going through some near-death experiences on multiple occasions. For one, like simple thing, like I wore my cross and a St. Michael pendant every time I went outside of the wire to go on a mission. And just the fact that I came back was enough for me to keep like wearing that, even though my flak jacket was like digging it into my chest and painful. It was just something that I felt like, well, I don't know how much weight I could add to my faith right now, but just by sheer fact that I'm coming back alive is enough for me to at least be interested in this. Getting out of the military and going through my transition, and there was a 3-year period where some horrific things happened in my life that I couldn't explain. And I hit the lowest valley that I had experienced, and that was the place where I found God. And that was a true test of, really, what am I going to do next? Because to me, the crossroads, there was just a fork. I could either lose my life, or I could enter into this other space that was one that I haven't walked down before, and that was my spiritual journey. And that was truly what pulled me out of, that dark place that I was in.
Now, do you at ClearPath, do you guys incorporate this when you're working with other people? Do you guys talk about this? Do you have a program for this as well?
So everything we do at ClearPath is based on different pillars of wellness. And for the longest time, we have an actual wellness program where we incorporate mindfulness, meditation, different non-clinical modalities for veterans to experience and see if it's something that is healing for them so that they can continue on with a practitioner either in their community or at the VA or wherever they decide to go. We've recently this year launched some workshops that are more spiritual based, so people can start to, from whatever faith or denomination they come from, they can come experience some spiritual direction with some trained professionals to talk about things like prayer and communicating with God and your relationship. And for those that are, looking to find a church community or something like that, we're building a network of providers within New York State so that we can redirect them to a place where they can go find that. It's not something that we're still very young in this, so there's a long way to go, and it's a very sensitive topic, to be honest with you, and we're mindful of that. And my job is not to evangelize the whole community. I have my story, and it's something that there's no words to express the power of that for me. But those that are interested in having a conversation about it, I'm always happy to sit down and have some coffee and discuss my journey and how that was, really healing for me.
I think that's really beautiful because it's not forcing it on people. It's just kind of just talking about it, because spirituality is very, however you view that, it is very personal for every single person. Everyone views it differently. Everyone has a different relationship to God. And I always enjoy asking people questions about this. I do want to come back to ClearPath for a minute, but I want to switch back to when you got out. I want to ask how you got involved with ClearPath, and I know that you had a special dog, a German Shepherd. I believe Harley was her name.
Yep.
And I want to ask you about her and how you got involved with that first.
Yeah. So being introduced to ClearPath, after I got out, it was about 7 years before I was introduced to ClearPath. And all the while, I was trying to figure out what the next steps were for my life. I engaged in a criminal justice degree, tried to get a job in law enforcement, which it just didn't work out for me. And following that, I went to school for forestry, ended up becoming an arborist for an international company. And I loved the job. It was extremely challenging, and it taught me some really incredible skills that I still have to this day. But really wasn't doing well for my body, and I worked with small teams, and it was incredible, but a lot of the guys I worked with were pretty rough around the edges and still had some of the same setbacks that I had experienced, so it wasn't really helping me find purpose or that service beyond service that I was looking for. So a friend of mine was working at ClearPath at the time, running their employment program, and he had reached out to me and said that they were looking for a veteran that lived in the southern tier of New York State to cover a large catchment area and work with other veterans that are experiencing the challenges of navigating from military to civilian culture. So I was ecstatic to get the opportunity. He brought me to ClearPath for the first time, and I looked like I just got done with 10 hours of tree work, so I was covered in wood chips and dirt, and I thought he was just coming to show me the place, right? And he brings me into the executive office and introduced me to the whole leadership team, and I'm like, really? You could have warned me that you're going to introduce me to all these people. And there was a retired sergeant major that was serving as a chief of staff. The founder was there, Melissa Spicer. And I was just like, holy moly, this is the whole leadership team behind ClearPath. And they just embraced me. They just welcomed me to this campus. She's a farmer, so she knows hard work. And we got right into great conversation. And I just felt connected immediately by both civilians and veterans, and it felt like this was the place for me. So I applied for this job, and it did horribly on the interview, and but they saw something within my character that I didn't see, and they said, like, yeah, we want you to do this job. So I was selected, ended up becoming a peer mentor, and started to learn about all the incredible programs that they were doing. Now, what I want to say about this, too, is, like, I don't feel like I was ready to be a peer mentor when I took the job, but I would be remiss if I didn't say that by me experiencing that job as a peer mentor and going out to walk shoulder to shoulder with other veterans that were really facing these crisis situations, it humbled me, and it also helped me take a look in the mirror and start to change my own behavior too. But more than anything else, we were offering this canine program called Dogs to Vets at ClearPath back in 2016. And I would talk with the staff all the time, like, this looks incredible. Like, what you guys are doing is huge. And I never qualified myself to be appropriate for that program, but I had a couple people, including the founder, the program director, say, like, Ryan, like, you should apply for this program. You are more than qualified for it, and your experiences warrant this. And it took me a long time to be like, I don't know, like, there are a lot of other veterans out there that could probably deserve this more than me. But eventually I was convinced, and I applied for the program, and that began like a whole new chapter for me.
Now, I was very interested about when you were talking about, you said that your dog technically shouldn't have been a service dog, and that she had started to pick up some of your own habits, which actually reflected back to you things that you needed to work on. And I think that that's really amazing, first of all, to kind of be able to identify that in there. But how did that help you to be able to help them grow and learn from that?
That took a lot, to be honest with you. I know now, and I heard a guy say before, like, you don't get the dog you want, you get the dog you need. And that stuck with me at some point in time, because my experience with this program, I entered into it to receive a service dog that could provide this healing journey for me. And I was met with extreme resistance, but I don't think it was 100% the dog's fault, really, to be honest with you. This is why the program transformed over time. But now I know, and it was through 8 months of training with this particular dog that I learned that they are a reflection of your inner emotional state. Like, dogs are the best way to really give you a baseline of what you're experiencing or feeling in the present moment. There's no greater way for me, at least, to experience the present moment than training with my dog. And after I had navigated all of this training and realized, like, my mental health and the state that I was at, while I was qualified for the program, I didn't have the coping mechanisms and things that I have now that may have changed that whole process, right? Like, just how my dog was reacting and responding to the way I was feeling. She thought she was doing the right thing. And I probably wasn't upset about it, to be honest with you, because she was reacting to people coming close to me. She didn't she did not like strangers getting within my space, which just made the isolation a little bit worse, to be honest with you. And all of these tendencies, and really, like, my behavior and my emotional state was running right down the leash. And I ended up, pulling the white flag and saying, like, hey, I appreciate everything you guys are doing for me, but this isn't going to work. There's no way. I've learned a lot through this process, but clearly there's some things that I need to work on personally before I can re-engage this. But that experience opened up this new door for me, and I really loved training dogs. Like, I developed an obsession with it, and I had talked with the staff, and I said, like, hey, how cool would it be if you had a peer mentor working within the canine program to actually walk alongside the veterans going through this program? And what would it take for me to go through a training, like an actual professional training program, to become a professional dog trainer? And they were immediately receptive to that idea because at the time it was all civilians running the program, which is fine. That works out just fine. But having a veteran embedded within that ecosystem just made it all the better. And so I went through training. I got my certification. I started to travel and look at what other organizations were doing in terms of best practices. And my experience, with Harley really it is the milestone for me. And I feel bad saying this, but that's what transformed the program, in my opinion. It was doing really well up until that time, but having experienced that personally as a staff member and going through it, I knew at that moment that we could do so much better. And there are some things that we could build to this program that would just transform it. And it wouldn't have happened had I not experienced that with her.
Now, do you, when they're doing this dog program with the vets, do the dogs have a specific training that they go through first and then you incorporate bringing a vet in? Because I know that you've mentioned that you'll bring vets in and they'll come in for a week or so with them. So what kind of training, is it very extensive that they have to have prior to getting placed with a vet? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, so 10 years ago, much different, right? My experience was you would be matched with a dog from a shelter and go through about 2 years of training with them. There's a lot of benefit to that because there's no greater way to build a relationship with a dog than going through long training with them. But there's a lot of dogs that wouldn't meet the criteria to become service dogs through that model. Nowadays, we actually have a puppy development program. We're accredited by Assistance Dogs International, and we're selecting some of the highest degree of how do I put this? Some of the best service dogs that can go through our training model as puppies. And this is all done through a cooperative breeding program that ADI does. And they're looking at health, genetics, temperament, trainability, and so many other things that get into the deep science of service dogs. And these service dogs that we're bringing into our program, their parents were service dogs and their parents' parents were service dogs. And there's this long lineage of successful service dogs that what I had learned through my own journey is that's just critically important. And so we train these puppies from the time they're born until they're 2 years old. And at that point in time, actually a couple months prior, we're bringing in veterans into the program and beginning to do this matching process to better understand who we're serving and what dogs would be most compatible with them. And once we've identified a cohort of dogs between 2 and 3 that we think would be a good match, we bring the veteran in for about 3 weeks of training. 5 days of that is all online instructional learning. And then for 10 days, they're actually on site getting about 6 to 8 hours of training a day to develop all the skill sets that we built within the dog, and so they can go back into their communities with a fully trained service dog.
Now, if something were to happen to the vet or something and they couldn't keep the dog or they passed away or something like that, are you guys able to take those service dogs back and then retrain them for another vet?
Yeah, that's a little complicated, but we do have a couple different policies. One is ClearPath actually owns every dog that we put out into the community. And that is because of animal welfare. In case anything happened within that situation where the dog became unsafe or there was a concern over care, that we would be able to take the dog back. That's the last thing we ever would want to do, but we have to have that in place in case that time comes. Alternatively, we do ask everybody going through our program to identify at least 3 people that they would include as a support system. So if something does happen to them, the handler, and they have to be in the hospital or anything like that, where they're going to be out of commission for a while, that the dog has a safe place to go. So we have different measures in place. The one thing is we just want to ensure that the dog is happy, healthy, and lives a long life and is compatible with their veteran and can perform these specialized tasks to help mitigate some of their challenges and help them lead a more independent life. The other part is once the dog reaches the stage of retirement, we actually formally adopt them to their veteran. So eventually they do claim ownership, but while they're in this working capacity, ClearPath maintains the ownership side of the house, and we check up every month for the first 6 months and then yearly after that to ensure that they're still doing well, the dog's performing the way they need to perform. If there's remedial training required, we offer that, and we do our best to ensure that they're going to be successful after their training.
I know a lot of people love animals and they love their cats and their dogs and different things, but I have noticed veterans are very like attached to their animals, and it's a really beautiful relationship that they form with that. And I was wondering if you could kind of speak to that, like how the animals help service members, like in that really profound way.
It is profound, and it's hard to put words to it because it's not just the training and the task and the things that the dog actually does to mitigate symptoms, right? But it is what they do. Like before we bring in a veteran into our program, we have a licensed social worker do an in-depth interview to better understand some of their unique challenges. And oftentimes, a veteran or their support system will describe some of the comorbidities or symptoms that they have, like anxiety, nightmares, panic attacks, fear of crowds, a lot of different things, nightmares. And we actually ask these questions like, so how does that present itself, like physically? What does it look like? And with that information, we can form a picture that we can then train the dog to perform a response on. So the smallest things can happen, like you touching your face or playing with your wedding band or bouncing your knee up and down, or just your body chemistry is off and you're experiencing higher levels of cortisol because of your anxieties through the roof. Our dogs are trained to do something about all of that. So they will perform a specific behavior and start to begin grounding their veteran within those episodes. And it's incredible. I mean, after time, you start to pick up on all these different things that dogs do. And the funny thing about this is pets do this stuff all the time. They have an intuition about them in which they know their handlers so well that they start doing things automatically when they're experiencing these heightened levels of stress. And sometimes people get frustrated about that. Like I'll use the example, I have a Dutch Shepherd that is a Dutch Shepherd, and I'll leave it at that, just really high drive dog, and seeks attention all the time. And he knows, like, as soon as I pick up my phone, that I'm going to disassociate for however long because of what I'm doing. And he'll come up to me and literally, like, knock it out of my hand. Like, literally, it goes flying across the room. And on one end of the spectrum, like, I'm frustrated. Like, it's irritating because he just ruined a dopamine chain or whatever it is I was experiencing. But on the other end, I'm like, he just wants to connect with me. He's just looking to break the cycle so that I will connect with him in the moment. And I would encourage any of you that experience something similar like that, like, don't get mad. Just lean into it. Like, experience life with your dog. That's why we get them. The relationship is where the true healing comes from. That bond and having a battle buddy to go with you everywhere you go. There is no words to describe the mutual relationship between a dog and their owner or a veteran and their dog. It's incredible. It's something to lose too. I will say, like, I did not have a happy ending to my story, right? Like, I went through this training with Harley, and she ended up getting hit by a car at some point. And when I lost her, it was, again, like being driven down to those dark moments. That was one of the lowest valleys I've ever been in, because what she represented was everything about healing and restoration, and I lost her in a horrific way. But I had to have that experience if I were to come back and transform this program to being internationally accredited, providing service dogs all across the country with the highest trained dogs available. So I'm grateful for my scars, kind of thing, but it was a lot to go through at the time.
I was just going to ask you about that because I know that you ended up having to put your dog down, and you obviously knew you were, you said you were isolated in the area, and I believe you said that there was a vet who had come up and told you that the dog wasn't going to make it anyway.
Yeah.
And I want to ask that because being able to identify that your animal needs to be put down is one thing, but having to do it yourself, how hard was that, knowing that bond that you had with her? Like, was it easier because you knew that you were doing the right thing for her while it was still incredibly challenging and hard for you?
To be immersed in that experience, it it was one of, if not the hardest moment of my life for sure. That I still struggle with it, to be honest with you. But again, there was so much meaning behind it. The event that actually happened in and of itself. Yeah, I mean, hit by a car. I'm on my way home, and I get a call from some kid that hit her with his truck, and he said, "I'm sorry, like I hit your dog." And I just immediately went into a reflexive state based on my military experience, and I was like, "Is she still alive?" Yes. Then I hung up the phone and I just said, "I'm on my way." And this happened while I was rebuilding the program. So the reason I didn't bring her to work that day is because we had just adopted 8 puppies. We were bringing them up through a puppy development program, and I just couldn't have her at work that day. So it was like, wow, all these things are just happening at once. And I arrived on scene, I looked at her, and I knew right out of the gate. Like, I didn't even have to ask a question. A friend of mine was there. He was a farmer. He knows a lot about life and death and animals and that kind of thing. And I looked at him, and I knew by the look in his eye, like this was not good. This was the final moment. And so, the vet stopped, said she had a broken back, she couldn't see, she's blood coming out of both ends, she's suffering. And so, the most compassionate thing I could do in the moment was take her life. And by doing that, I feel like it honestly took a part of my soul with it. And for the next week, I was in a very dark place. And it took, I had just quit drinking too, a couple months prior. So this happened March of 2018, 2018. I quit drinking November of 2017. So not a large window of time there. And I remember after I went through this, one of the guys there immediately offered me a beer, and I said no. I just went numb, and I got angry. I brought her home, I buried her, and just experienced the full measure of grief. And I hadn't experienced grief like this ever in my entire life. Even in the military, it's just something very unique and special about it. But after 3 or 4 days, I called the founder of ClearPath, and she knew, everybody there, they loved Harley, and they all were experiencing the weight of this. And she said, I told her, I was like, I'm going to do something about this. I have to channel this and transform this horrible event into something positive, or I'm not going to be able to continue on. I just had to. So because of that, I was able to start methodically going through every single little detail within our canine program and elevating it to where it is today. So again, my misery is somebody else's blessing, and there has been no greater experience to have gone through that. As horrible as it sounds, I don't wish that on my worst enemies. It's just terrible. I'll never forget it, but it's something that I will carry forever. In almost every graduation we have, I talk about her and what she's done for me and what she's done for ClearPath and the program. So, it lives on, and I'm grateful for that.
Do you think that some of the military people who have these service dogs and stuff, do you think that bond gets stronger too? Because obviously you guys are, you built your life of being of service to other people, the country, different things, and these animals are also built to be of service to you. Do you think that helps create that bond as well?
Yeah, it's a mutual relationship. There's services running on both ends of the leash there. We select dogs that are going to better facilitate social interaction with the community too. So, Harley was a black pointy-eared German Shepherd, and some people are willing to come up and talk to me. Most people weren't because they were terrified of her, and she made it apparent to be terrified. But the dogs that we're bringing into our program, we have 2 different models. One is owner-trainer. So we do let veterans bring their own dogs into our program. And as long as they can pass a temperament test, we'll enroll them into training for a minimum period of 6 months. It's still a high bar to hit. And then we have these floppy-eared golden retrievers and labs. And, you can't not like approach somebody that has that kind of dog in the general public. And that's like the paradigm about our program. Like you're going to be the center of attention. People are going to want to talk to you. And that's the interesting part about it, because most veterans, they don't want to have collisions with the general public. But through this process, they learn that it's like the public is your friend. Like you should be having these casual conversations and talking about your dog. And, it's not always the right situation to let people come pet your dog and everything like that. Sometimes they're working. Sometimes there's a moment where you don't want them to be distracted. But other times, you can pet my dog, totally. Like if it's going to make you feel better, like please do. I think that's really important. It's an interesting element that really helps integrate veterans back into their community. But the service is continuous. I mean, it's happening through both the dog and the veteran. The veteran is serving the dog is serving the veteran. There's still a large part of a working dog's life that what people often don't understand is they're still dogs. Like you still got to go take them out and play Frisbee with them, let them go swimming, go on adventures, experience life together. And that's what's, I think, really special about that bond too. There's a balance of work and play and downtime.
Okay, I just want to ask you about this because you mentioned it too, and a lot of times we'll see like the dogs who will have they have the vests on and saying "working dog, please don't touch," and a lot of people like please don't, How do when you guys are working with the service animals for the vets? Is that similar to ones that are being worked for like medical purposes where people don't want you to touch them, or is it a different training?
Yeah, so every working dog career is a little bit different. What I'll say about dogs that are trained to help with post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury, the general public still should just kind of ignore them as best as possible, because you just never know what's going on. And if you do happen to come across a service dog handler, you look the handler in the eye, and if you want to pet them, ask them. I definitely encourage get into conversation with them. Dogs are very social beings, right? They want to interact with the general public almost as much as the general public wants to interact with them, and it's hard for them to continue to do that job. So it can be really difficult for a veteran to go out into public and have somebody just staring eye to eye with their dog, and the dog's wagging their tail, they want to go to them, but the veteran's in a situation where the dog's working, and it can be complicated. So there's a balance to be maintained. Always assume the dog is working if their vest is on, and talk to the handler, don't talk to the dog. Dogs respond to the strangest things, right? Like you get down on a knee, what's a dog want to do? They want to come right up to you. And it's no different for a trained service dog. We try to train them not to do that. But at the end of the day, there's a balance of, you got to give the dog grace. These people are really, really egging this dog on to come visit with them. And it can put people in a difficult situation. So my encouragement to those out there that see service dogs out in public is, if you really feel compelled to pet them, start with a conversation with the handler and see if it's okay. And then if they say yes, go from there. If they say no, don't take offense to it. It's because whatever the situation is, they need their dog to continue working in the capacity that they're in.
Now, I was really impressed when I was doing some research on ClearPath and all the different things that they do in creating that community for the vets. I saw they had date nights for service members and their spouses, and there was barbecues around the holidays, and you mentioned all the different, the mindfulness and the different things that you guys are also creating there. And I wanted to ask you two different elements to that. One, how have you noticed a transformation in creating that community where they are surrounded by people who have also been in similar situations for them, but also incorporating, trying to incorporate the public so that they can also feel more at home outside of that area as well?
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. One thing I'll highlight is every Wednesday, our culinary program puts on an event called Canteen. And Canteen is a community luncheon where our volunteers and staff put together this amazing lunch at no cost for veterans and their families. And every Wednesday we'll have anywhere between 150 and 300 people on campus experiencing this meal. They're also experiencing camaraderie, community. They're interacting with staff. They're getting referred to different programs and things that they can participate in. But ClearPath is like an ecosystem that is all veteran-centric, including their families, to bring them to this path of restoration and healing. And we do that through peer support. We do it through our canine program, through wellness, through a lot of different things. But nobody's journey is going to be the same. So we really do our best to get to know everybody that's entering into ClearPath so that we can redirect them to the right programs and get them to where they're going. I tell people often there's like a continuum of crisis of those we serve. And some of those can't even put food on the table, and they need a peer mentor to drive a food package out to them, or they can't keep a roof over their heads, and they need a peer mentor to navigate and help them find housing. On the same token, we have those that are retiring from the military and just looking for purpose beyond, their military experience. And we have career training programs for them to go through at ClearPath and help them find a meaningful job or employment. And we have a huge segment that's right in the middle of that are working families, veterans that have gone through different experiences that just want to find a tribe to connect to come to ClearPath, experience everything that we're doing. And we do a lot. My biggest challenge when people ask me what ClearPath does is that there's such a long list. We have some core programs, but the best way to learn more is, to talk to somebody, but go to the website, check us out on some of the social platforms. We always have a list of events that are going on every month, and they're always full. There's something going on every day.
Yeah, it's. I was so impressed seeing it, and I was like, wow, this is like and not only that, you guys are in upstate New York, and you are in a beautiful, like, naturey area, beautiful surroundings. I know you had mentioned that you guys are trying to build cabins so that when you have people come, they can stay there instead of being in B&Bs and stuff. So I wanted to ask you, how do you guys get the community involved too to also support the work that you're doing?
A lot of different ways. So all of our puppies are raised by what we call canine guardians, puppy raisers. So volunteers that open up their homes to raising a puppy for 18 months. It's an incredible way to give back for those who've served. It's a hard thing to do because you develop a bond with the puppy. We foster dogs at the Woodruff home all the time, and it's never easy bringing them back for their intensive training. But it's a really incredible, special way to give back. So every graduation, we had one yesterday for a Marine Corps vet that went back to his community in Florida. We do a leash passing ceremony where the veteran and the foster, the canine guardian, come together and they pass the leash and they put the vest on the dog. And it's a ritual, but it's pretty special. And there's usually not a dry eye in the room because it's just such a meaningful thing to see the community coming alongside the veteran to support, this important next step. The community also puts on fundraisers for us. We have some local gyms that do some events and different campaigns to raise funding to help us support, everything that we're doing. A lot of people don't know, but it costs a lot of money to train and place a service dog. For ClearPath, it's almost $52,000. So getting the community to come together to really help raise funds to support every dog going through our program is not just something that's important, but it's necessary. It takes a village to continue to do the work that we're doing. And we have 30 plus volunteers in our kitchen every day helping put together food for veterans and families coming to our canteen luncheon. We have 78 acres on the property, so there's a lot of grounds maintenance and things of that nature. So we're very fortunate to have a huge community of volunteers that said yes to giving back to veterans and forming a protective circle around them. So grateful for that, and that's some of the ways the community gets involved.
And you guys also, you don't just serve the members in New York. I know you've said that you've had people fly out from out west, and you support down to Philadelphia and stuff. Has ClearPath ever thought about, because it's such a unique program, what you guys have going? Have they ever had conversations about expanding and opening up like different branches in different areas throughout the U.S.?
Yeah, and we welcome those conversations. So for us is really to become masters of what we do before we take everything that we've accomplished over the last 15 years and transplant it to a new location. But it is certainly something that's on the forefront of our minds. We think that every community in the country should have a clear path for sure. There's really nothing like it. It's been, it's a challenge to do so, but I think it's just really important from a messaging standpoint that we do serve veterans nationally. Our canine program provides dogs all over the country. We have dogs in Oregon, we have dogs in Florida, everywhere, really. They're all over the place. And we also do a vocational training program called Operation Socrates, where we're serving veteran or active service members that are on their way out of the military through a Department of Defense skill bridge program to help them find teaching jobs in the K through 12 school districts in every state across the country. So it's a unique way to engage national programming, but we're doing it. We're doing it well. There's still a long way to go. We are expanding digitally too, so all of our programming is going to be available online through our website, through a unique login system that's coming next year, hopefully, as long as the funding comes through. And we'll continue to do the K-9 program nationally, but it will only be so long before we start to expand physically as well. So we're doing really well in New York State. And again, I think every community could benefit from a clear path. So I look forward to those next steps, but there's more than enough work to do within this community as well.
I know that you have twin daughters, I believe.
Boy and a girl.
I wanted to ask, a boy and a girl. Okay. What if your kids grew up and decided that they wanted to go in the military? What would your thoughts be on that, and what advice would you give them?
So I talk about this with my son quite often because that's where it normally comes up. So far, my daughter hasn't mentioned any interest in joining the military. But, for me, I hear stories all the time of parents that served in the military that are unwilling to discuss their real world experience of what they went through in the military to their kids. And that doesn't do them justice when it comes to actually making that decision to enlist or not. Of course, I would wholeheartedly support my kids if they wanted to join the military. There's no greater honor to serve your country, in my opinion. And if that's a route they want to go down, I'd be a fool to say anything otherwise. I know nobody was going to stop me from becoming a Marine. On the other end of that, though, I'm being honest with my son and my daughter and telling them it's not all what the videos and pictures show it to be. It's hard, and some of the wounds that you'll experience will last a lifetime. My son tells me now, he's 8 years old, and he wants to be the CEO of ClearPath. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll see. In a couple decades, we'll see if those are some shoes you want to fill.
That's amazing. He'll be running another branch.
Yeah, right.
I have two questions left that I want to ask you, and be mindful of your time. The first question I ask every guest is, do you believe in fate, or do you think that everything is predestined? And I know that fate is predestined, but I'm talking more on the path of chance or, things happening that way.
So I think that our free will really helps steer the course of our lives, right? I actually, in my prayer last night, I was saying thank you for my ability to choose. I can navigate my story. I think there is foreknowledge of everything that's going to happen by a higher power, but when it comes to things that occur, there are moments that I've experienced in my life that I would say are divine providence. They happened. They were supposed to happen. However, there's a choice at the other end of that you're going to make. It's just that the conditions that were provided within that given circumstance, there are countless times that I've experienced these crazy coincidences that I'm like, how could this be anything but, something spiritual? And so I think there's a little bit of a duality to it where there's things that are predestined that happen within your life, but you're also given a choice in which path you're going to lead down.
Okay, so this is going to be my next question, and you just kind of touched on this a little bit. On your faith path, do you believe that there is free will? And when I say that, I mean, obviously there is free will to go different paths, to take different ways. But if you're fully in alignment and you're following those nudges or those things that you feel happening, do you still think that that's free will, or do you think that the ultimate path is not?
Great question. And I would say I still feel like we have the ability to choose. I think that's something that's a gift. I think it's in our original design, and that we were given, really, and I look at this and I say, I am created in the image of God. I was given the ability to choose in this free will, and I can choose a path of as close to righteousness as I can get, or I can choose a path of destruction. We see it happen all the time. And there's just been too much in my own life that I've experienced where I know there are some times where I chose the wrong path, for sure. And I could have alternatively said, well, if I chose this other route, it may have gone differently. Doesn't always, I don't live with regret, though. I say that the choices that I've made have gotten me to where I am today. But knowing what I know now, I'm just very carefully navigating what those next steps are, but also paying attention to the conditions. I think that's something that we lack. Just the willingness to stop and pause and listen within to what you're being prompted with. Like what direction am I being pushed in here, and is it the right way?
I love that. And I also think like what you just said too, with that stopping and pausing and kind of listening to yourself. It's also like taking that time to realize that everything's happening. Like we're so busy all the time and thinking, oh, why is this happening to me? But everything's happening for you. And if you kind of take that time to be still and listen, you'll see that.
I couldn't agree anymore. Yeah, for sure.
I love that. Ryan, thank you so much. I have really enjoyed talking to you. I love what you guys are doing at ClearPath. If anyone wants to donate or to get in touch or get involved with this, how can they get in touch with you?
Easiest way is to check out the website. We also are on all the social platforms. You can email us at info@clearpathforvets.org. You can reach out to me personally. You can call the office and I'll pick up the phone and talk to you. There's a million different ways to connect with us.
Awesome. Thank you so much. As I said to you beforehand, my dad was in the military, and I think like programs like this would have been amazing for him at the time that he got out of the military. So I think that what you guys are doing is amazing. So thank you so much for being of service to your communities and to other vets.
My pleasure. I appreciate it.
Thank you.